Piero Barone's transformation shocked fans and changed Il Volo forever. When Piero Barone first stepped onto the stage of Italy's Ti lascio una canzone in 2009, he was 14 years old, boyishly handsome, and possessed a tenor voice that seemed impossibly mature for someone still navigating adolescence. Alongside Ignazio Boschetto and Gianluca Ginobili, he formed Il Volo, a trio that would go on to captivate audiences across the globe with their operatic pop sound and youthful charm. For years, fans watched these three young men grow from teenagers into adults, their voices deepening and their stage presence evolving with each performance. Yet it was Piero's transformation that sparked the most intense discussion among devotees of the group. Somewhere between those early television appearances and the sold-out arena tours that followed, Piero Barone underwent a metamorphosis so complete that longtime fans found themselves doing double takes at recent photographs, struggling to reconcile the polished, confident performer they saw with the sweet-faced boy they remembered from Il Volo's earliest days. This transformation was not merely physical, though the changes in his appearance were certainly striking. It encompassed his vocal artistry, his stage presence, his fashion sensibility, and perhaps most significantly, the way he inhabited his role within one of the most successful classical crossover acts of the 21st century. What began as whispered observations in fan forums eventually became impossible to ignore, and the conversation about Piero's evolution became inseparable from discussions about Il Volo's own journey from teenage phenomenon to mature musical institution. Piero Barone was born on June 24, 1993, in Naro, a small town in the province of Agrigento in Sicily. Like many Italian children with musical gifts, he grew up surrounded by the sounds of traditional Italian music, opera, and the popular music that dominated Italian radio and television. His family recognized his vocal talent early, and by the time he was a young child, Piero was already performing at local events and competitions. Sicily's rich cultural heritage and its deep connection to operatic tradition provided a fertile ground for a young tenor to develop. And Piero absorbed these influences with a natural ease that suggested he was born to sing. His voice, even in childhood, carried a warmth and clarity that made it stand out, and his family encouraged him to pursue formal training and performance opportunities. The moment that would change Piero's life forever came in 2009 when he auditioned for Ti lascio una canzone, a popular Italian television program that showcased young singing talents performing classic Italian and Neapolitan songs. The show's format brought together children and teenagers to celebrate Italy's musical heritage, and it was here that Piero met Ignazio Boschetto and Gianluca Ginobili. The three teenagers were paired together by the show's director, Roberto Cenci, who recognized that their voices blended in a way that was both distinctive and commercially viable. They performed O Sole Mio together, and the chemistry was immediate. Their performance electrified the audience and judges alike, and soon they were no longer three individual competitors, but a unified group with a name that captured their aspiration. Il Volo, meaning the flight. In those early days, Piero was the embodiment of youthful Italian charm. He had soft features, a gentle smile, and an earnestness that endeared him to audiences who watched the trio's meteoric rise. His hair was worn in a style typical of teenage boys of that era, and his clothing reflected the somewhat awkward transition between childhood and young adulthood. On stage, he moved with the slight self-consciousness of someone still growing into his body, not yet fully aware of the power he commanded when he opened his mouth to sing. Yet when he did sing, something remarkable happened. His voice carried a maturity and emotional depth that belied his years, capable of navigating the demanding passages of Neapolitan classics and operatic arias with surprising technical proficiency. This juxtaposition between his youthful appearance and his mature vocal instrument became one of the defining characteristics of early Il Volo, and Piero embodied this contrast perhaps more than his bandmates. Il Volo's success was swift and overwhelming. After their television debut, they were signed to a major record label and began recording their first album. They performed for increasingly prestigious audiences, including a memorable appearance at the Sanremo Music Festival in 2010 and a performance for Pope Benedict XVI. By 2011, they had made their American debut, performing on networks like Good Morning America and appearing in concerts across the United States. The American market embraced Il Volo with particular enthusiasm, drawn to the novelty of three Italian teenagers performing classical and operatic music with the energy and appeal of a pop group. Piero, Ignazio, and Gianluca found themselves traveling the world, performing in venues they had only dreamed of as children, and building a devoted international fan base. For Piero, this early success meant that his transition from adolescence to adulthood would unfold entirely in the public eye. Every awkward phase, every physical change, every moment of personal growth would be documented in photographs, videos, and social media posts. While most teenagers navigate these years in relative privacy, experimenting with their appearance and identity away from public scrutiny, Piero's evolution was a matter of public record. The pressure this created was multifaceted. There were the obvious demands of maintaining a rigorous performance schedule, spending weeks or months away from home, adjusting to different time zones and cultures, and delivering consistently excellent vocal performances night after night. But there were also more subtle pressures related to image and identity. Il Volo had been marketed, particularly in their earliest years, as a group of wholesome, charming Italian boys whose appeal lay partly in their youth and innocence. As they aged, there was an implicit expectation that they would maintain certain qualities that had endeared them to their original fan base, while somehow also maturing and evolving as artists. The international attention brought both opportunities and challenges. Il Volo performed for presidents and dignitaries, sang at the Olympic Games, and shared stages with legendary artists like Barbra Streisand and Placido Domingo. They built a particularly strong following in Latin America, where their romantic ballads and passionate performances resonated deeply with audiences. For Piero, these experiences were formative, exposing him to different musical traditions, performance styles, and artistic standards. He learned from watching and working alongside established performers, absorbing lessons about stagecraft, vocal technique, and the art of connecting with an audience. Yet this rapid ascent also meant that he had little time for the normal experiences of young adulthood. Friendships, relationships, personal exploration, and the simple freedom to make mistakes away from public judgment were all complicated by his celebrity status. The transformation that would eventually shock fans and reshape Il Volo's identity did not happen overnight. It was a gradual process that began subtly and then accelerated as Piero moved through his late teens and into his 20s. The physical changes were among the most immediately noticeable. The soft features of adolescence gave way to a more defined, masculine facial structure. His jawline became more prominent, and his features took on a sculpted quality that marked the transition from boy to man. He began experimenting with facial hair, sometimes appearing clean-shaven, and at other times sporting a carefully groomed beard that added maturity and sophistication to his appearance. His body changed as well, becoming more muscular and defined, suggesting a commitment to fitness and physical conditioning that had not been as evident in his teenage years. Perhaps even more striking than these physical changes was the evolution in Piero's personal style and the way he carried himself. The somewhat awkward teenager who had once performed in outfits chosen by stylists or management began making more deliberate choices about his appearance. He developed a keen interest in fashion, often appearing in designer clothing that reflected contemporary Italian-style sensibilities. His hair became a particular point of transformation, styled in ways that ranged from slicked-back elegance to more textured, modern cuts that demonstrated an awareness of current trends. He acquired visible tattoos, marking his skin with designs that held personal significance and signaling a willingness to make permanent choices about his appearance that would have been unthinkable in Il Volo's early days. These tattoos became a topic of considerable discussion among fans, some of whom saw them as a natural expression of individuality, and others who mourned what they perceived as a departure from the clean-cut image they had fallen in love with. The transformation extended to Piero's stage presence and performance style. Where once he had moved with boyish enthusiasm and a touch of uncertainty, he now commanded the stage with a confidence that bordered on swagger. His interactions with audiences became more assured, his movements more deliberate and choreographed. He learned to work a camera with the skill of someone who understood his angles and knew how to create compelling visual moments. During performances, he exhibited a sensuality and emotional intensity that had been largely absent from his teenage years, bringing a new dimension to Il Volo's romantic repertoire. Songs about love and longing, which he had once performed with technical precision but limited lived experience, now carried a weight and authenticity that suggested genuine emotional depth. This growing confidence was not merely superficial. It reflected a deeper maturation in Piero's understanding of himself as an artist and performer. He became more willing to take creative risks, to experiment with interpretation, to assert his artistic vision within the collaborative framework of the group. In interviews, he spoke with greater articulateness about music, about the songs Il Volo chose to perform, about the balance between honoring classical traditions and creating something contemporary and relevant. He demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of Il Volo's place in the musical landscape, acknowledging both their debt to the great Italian tenors of the past and their responsibility to bring that tradition to new audiences in new ways. The evolution of Piero's vocal artistry paralleled these other transformations and was perhaps the most significant from a purely musical standpoint. His voice, which had been impressive even in his teenage years, underwent further development as he matured physically and gained more experience and training. The transition from adolescence to adulthood often affects male singers significantly as their voices settle into their final range and character. For Piero, this meant that his tenor voice gained additional richness and power while maintaining the clarity and agility that had always been among its defining characteristics. He developed greater control over his breath support, allowing him to sustain longer phrases and execute more complex ornamentations with ease. His upper register, always a strength, became even more secure, enabling him to navigate the high notes that thrilled audiences with apparent effortlessness. More importantly, Piero's vocal interpretation became increasingly nuanced and emotionally sophisticated. In Il Volo's early recordings and performances, there was sometimes a sense that the three young men were performing songs they did not yet fully understand on an emotional level. They could execute the technical demands with impressive skill, but the life experience necessary to truly inhabit certain songs was not yet available to them. As Piero matured, this changed dramatically. He began to bring genuine emotional depth to his performances, finding the sadness in melancholy ballads, the joy in celebratory numbers, the longing in romantic arias. His phrasing became more thoughtful, with subtle variations in dynamics and tempo that served the emotional content of the lyrics rather than simply showcasing vocal technique. He learned when to hold back and when to unleash the full power of his voice, creating dramatic arcs within individual songs that kept audiences engaged and moved. This vocal maturation influenced Il Volo's performances significantly. The group's concerts became more varied and dynamic, incorporating not just traditional operatic repertoire and Neapolitan songs, but also contemporary ballads and crossover material that allowed them to demonstrate their versatility. Piero's increased confidence and interpretive skills enabled the group to take on more challenging arrangements and to perform with symphony orchestras and in prestigious venues that demanded the highest level of artistry. His voice blended seamlessly with those of Ignazio and Gianluca, but he also became more effective in solo passages, capable of holding an audience's attention completely when the spotlight fell on him alone. The harmonies that had always been Il Volo's signature became richer and more complex as all three voices matured. with Piero's tenor providing a bright, soaring top line that complemented Ignazio's baritone warmth and Gianluca's powerful tenor. Fan reaction to Piero's transformation was intense, varied, and deeply revealing of the complex relationship between performers and their audiences. For many longtime followers of Il Volo, watching Piero change was akin to watching a younger sibling or son grow up. They had been there from the beginning, had seen him as a sweet-faced 14-year-old, and had developed a sense of protective affection for him and his bandmates. When they began noticing the changes in his appearance and demeanor, their responses ranged from delight to concern to outright dismay. Social media platforms and fan forums became sites of vigorous debate about whether the transformation was positive or represented a loss of something essential to Il Volo's identity. Some fans celebrated Piero's evolution enthusiastically. They saw in his transformation evidence of healthy personal growth and artistic development. They appreciated his more sophisticated style, his confident stage presence, and the additional emotional depth he brought to performances. For these fans, Piero's maturation meant that Il Volo was evolving beyond their identity as a novelty act or teenage phenomenon and establishing themselves as serious, accomplished artists with long-term viability. They rejected any suggestion that the group should remain frozen in amber, arguing that artistic stagnation would be far more concerning than the natural changes that came with growing up. They pointed to the improved vocal performances, the more compelling concerts, and the group's continued success as evidence that the transformation was not only acceptable, but necessary and beneficial. Other fans responded with nostalgia and a sense of loss. They missed the innocent, boyish Piero they had first fallen in love with and worried that something essential had been lost in the transformation. They scrolled through old photographs and videos, marveling at how different he looked and lamenting the passage of time. For these fans, Piero's changing appearance was tied up with their own aging and changing lives. The same years that had transformed Piero from teenager to adult had also brought changes to their own circumstances, and there was a bittersweet quality to being reminded so visibly of time's passage. Some expressed concern that Piero was being influenced by celebrity culture in ways that were pulling him away from his roots and from the authentic Italian identity that had made Il Volo special. They worried about the pressure to conform to certain standards of appearance and behavior, and hoped that he remained true to himself beneath the external changes. A subset of fans reacted with critique and disappointment, particularly regarding certain aspects of Piero's transformation. The tattoos, the changing hairstyles, the more overtly sensual stage presence. These elements troubled some who felt they represented a departure from the values and image that had originally attracted them to Il Volo. There were debates about whether these changes reflected Piero's genuine preferences or were calculated to appeal to different demographics or to create a more marketable image. Some fans, particularly older ones or those with more conservative sensibilities, felt that the wholesome quality they valued in Il Volo was being compromised. These discussions sometimes became contentious, with accusations of being judgmental or overly controlling on one side and charges of superficiality or selling out on the other. The most passionate fans often found themselves experiencing conflicting emotions. They might simultaneously appreciate Piero's artistic growth while missing certain aspects of his earlier presentation. They might celebrate his confidence while feeling nostalgic for his boyish vulnerability. They recognized his right to make his own choices about his appearance and artistic direction, while also feeling a sense of ownership or investment in an artist they had supported from the beginning. This complexity reflected the broader challenges of being a devoted fan of any artist who undergoes significant changes over time. The parasocial relationship between performer and audience can create expectations and attachments that the performer never agreed to and may not even be aware of. And when those expectations are not met, the disappointment can feel intensely personal. These fan reactions, in all their diversity, reflected broader questions about Il Volo's evolution as a group. Piero's transformation was the most dramatic and most discussed, but all three members were maturing and changing. Ignazio, too, had evolved significantly in appearance and artistic approach. and Gianluca had developed a more commanding stage presence and vocal power. The group faced fundamental questions about their identity and direction. Should they continue to focus primarily on the operatic pop and Neapolitan repertoire that had made them famous? Should they incorporate more contemporary material and production styles? How should they balance the expectations of their core fan base with the desire to attract new, younger audiences? How should they navigate the tension between being marketed as romantic heartthrobs and being taken seriously as accomplished vocalists? Piero's transformation affected Il Volo's dynamic in several ways. His increased confidence and artistic assertiveness meant that the collaborative process within the group evolved. Where once decisions about repertoire, arrangements, and performance style may have been made largely by managers and producers, the maturing members of Il Volo began asserting more creative control. Piero, with his growing fashion sense and understanding of visual presentation, influenced how the group appeared in photographs, videos, and on stage. His willingness to experiment with different looks and styles sometimes pushed Il Volo toward a more contemporary aesthetic, even as they maintained their commitment to classical and traditional material. The group's musical direction shifted subtly but significantly as all three voices matured and as the members gained more input into creative decisions. They began incorporating more varied material into their concerts and recordings, including songs in languages beyond Italian and exploring different genres and time periods. They worked with renowned conductors and orchestras, performing in some of the world's most prestigious concert halls and opera houses. They returned to the San Remo Festival in 2015, this time as mature artists rather than teenage prodigies, and won the competition with Grande Amore, a sweeping romantic ballad that showcased their developed vocal abilities and demonstrated their evolution. This victory was significant not just for the accolade itself, but for what it represented. Validation that Il Volo had successfully transitioned from novelty act to respected musical institution. The public image of Il Volo shifted accordingly. While they retained the romantic, passionate quality that had always characterized their performances, they were increasingly presented as sophisticated artists rather than cute teenagers. Photo shoots became more stylized and fashion-forward. Album artwork and promotional materials reflected a more mature aesthetic. Their social media presence evolved from relatively innocent behind-the-scenes glimpses into a more curated professional operation that nonetheless allowed fans to feel connected to the members' lives and personalities. Piero's transformation was central to this shift, as his changing appearance and style were the most visible markers of Il Volo's overall evolution. The long-term implications of these changes for Il Volo's identity and sustainability as a group are still unfolding. The transformation from teenage prodigy to mature artist is a transition that many musical acts fail to navigate successfully. The history of popular music is littered with examples of performers who achieved early success based on youthful appeal and struggled to find relevance as they aged. Il Volo faced the additional challenge of working in a genre, classical crossover, that is notoriously difficult to sustain commercially over long periods. The fact that they have maintained and even expanded their audience more than 15 years after their formation is a testament to their talent, work ethic, and successful navigation of the maturation process. Piero's transformation played a crucial role in this sustainability. By allowing himself to evolve visibly and authentically, rather than attempting to maintain a static image that would have become increasingly incongruous with his actual age, he helped Il Volo avoid the trap of becoming a nostalgia act trading on past glory. His willingness to take risks with his appearance and artistic choices signaled that Il Volo was not content to simply repeat the same performances indefinitely, but was committed to growth and evolution. At the same time, he never abandoned the core elements that made his voice and his contribution to the group distinctive. The warmth, the clarity, the emotional expressiveness. These fundamental qualities remained even as the packaging changed. The story of Piero's transformation also reveals broader truths about growing up in the public eye and the particular challenges faced by performers who achieve fame in childhood or adolescence. The scrutiny, the expectations, the pressure to remain somehow unchanged while also demonstrating growth. These are burdens that most people never have to bear. That Piero navigated this process while maintaining his vocal excellence and his evident love for performing speaks to a resilience and groundedness that is not always present in young celebrities. He has spoken in interviews about the importance of his family, his Sicilian roots, and his friendships outside the music industry as anchors that have kept him connected to reality despite the often surreal circumstances of his life. There is also something poignant about the way Piero's transformation shocked fans because it reveals how much they had invested in a particular image of him and, by extension, of Il Volo. The shock was not really about the changes themselves. After all, everyone who lives long enough experiences physical changes and personal growth. Rather, it was about the collision between the static image preserved in photographs and memories and the living, changing reality of a human being continuing to develop and evolve. Fans who had first discovered Il Volo in 2009 or 2010 had a mental image of 3 teenage boys frozen at that particular moment, and seeing those boys transformed into men forced a reckoning with time's passage and change's inevitability. For Il Volo as an ensemble, Piero's transformation was both a challenge and an opportunity. It required them to address questions about their identity and to make deliberate choices about how they wanted to present themselves as they entered a new phase of their career. It created the possibility of alienating fans who were uncomfortable with change while also opening doors to new audiences who might not have been interested in 3 teenage boys singing opera, but were intrigued by 3 accomplished adult artists with impressive vocal abilities and compelling stage presence. The group chose to embrace the evolution rather than resist it, and that choice has allowed them to maintain relevance and continue performing at a high level. Ultimately, Piero Barone's transformation matters because it is inseparable from Il Volo's story and from the broader narrative of artistic growth and development. It demonstrates that talent alone is not sufficient for long-term success in the music industry. There must also be adaptability, self-awareness, and a willingness to evolve even when that evolution makes some people uncomfortable. It shows that artists are human beings who cannot and should not be expected to remain unchanged simply to serve their audience's nostalgia or comfort. It reveals the complex dynamics between performers and fans, the ways in which audiences invest emotionally in artists, and develop expectations that may or may not align with the artist's own vision for themselves. When fans say that Piero's transformation shocked them, they are acknowledging the power of change to surprise and sometimes disturb us, even when it is positive and natural. When they say it changed Il Volo forever, they are recognizing that a group is only as strong as its individual members, and that as each member grows and evolves, the collective entity must also transform. The Il Volo of 2025 is not the same group that appeared on Italian television in 2009, and Piero Barone is not the same boy who charmed audiences with his sweet face and mature voice. Both are more accomplished, more sophisticated, more confident, and more interesting. The transformation has been complete and ongoing, a process rather than a single moment, and it has ensured that Il Volo remains vital and relevant rather than becoming a pleasant memory of an earlier era. In the end, the story of Piero's transformation is a story about time, growth, artistry, and the courage to become oneself in full view of the world. It is about the joys and challenges of success achieved young, about the pressure of expectations and the freedom of authentic self-expression. It is about the relationship between image and substance, between appearance and artistry, between who we were and who we become. For fans who have followed this journey, it has been a reminder that the artists they love are not static objects to be preserved, but living beings on their own paths of discovery and development. And for Piero himself, it has been a journey of becoming, not just a more accomplished performer, but a more fully realized human being, confident in his identity and comfortable in his skin, ready to face whatever the next chapter of Il Volo's remarkable story brings.